everyone. Welcome to week 5 of season 3 in Formula G. We are at the halfway point after this week, and we've had a very interesting season shaping up and a very interesting week in Taiwan, our first real Asian country challenge. And it proved to be quite the challenge indeed for our drivers. Calamity, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Let's jump right in then and take a look at these feature race locations. Round 1, Calamity saw us in the north part of the island, just outside of the capital of Taipei, in a little suburb of Taoyuan, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And the location itself was very close to a lot of major roads, but if you had gone the wrong way, kind of similarly to American suburbs, for example, or Canadian suburbs, you can quickly get lost in there and lose a lot of time just going left, right, and still end up somewhere else in the same suburb without any useful information. And if you went ahead and lost all that time, then you might have struggled at the end in the pinpointing stage because the signs did not match the map, meaning that one of the two was wrong. I usually assume it's either that just, Google Maps is wrong, or that the coverage is outdated and they've just changed the signs for whatever reason. Can't be a good one. But overall, if you have made it out of there, it wasn't very difficult to find the general location. There were plenty of major roads just next to you.
Yep. Round 2 saw us head way to the south, but still on the west coast of the island in Tainan City, which literally means south of Taiwan. And a pretty nice location for this one.
Yeah, you were just south of a river, and well, it depends on what you think makes for a nice location. Going west probably didn't make it seem like a very nice location to you,
true.
but if you went east, you found a bridge relatively shortly, and on that you would have found that, hey, this is road number 19, and while road number 19 is pretty long, you still would have found that, hey, this is a river crossing here. There's not that many of those, and from then on, it wasn't too difficult to pinpoint either because you had a nice road going off up the embankment just north or just west of you, and that made it fairly easy to pinpoint as well.
And we also saw in our cast of this round that there was a bit of an area code. So if you memorize the area codes for Taiwan, that would also help you out. Round 3 saw us jump all the way back to the north, but on the east coast this time in Yilong County for a pretty, what I thought was one of the nicest rounds in terms of we were in a nice urban area.
Yeah, nice as well in terms of landscape and how everything looked. No houses actually on the map if you look at it. So not the easiest to pinpoint if that's your thing and trying to look for those, but you had a road to the southwest going off that, as long as you were able to confirm that that is in fact the road, because it can be sometimes tricky in cities to really judge, hey, this is a small path that goes off here, is it going to be on the map or not? In this case it was, and you had quite a few decent signs, both to the north and to the south, that would have given you the exact location of where you are. Nice few little road signs as well. And I rode going off to the east, just south of you, was there as well. So not a very difficult location, but quite nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, round 4 was a bit of a scary round in the sense that the starting location made it look like you were in a very rural area, but thankfully you were actually not too far from a couple major roads, including the one. So very nice indeed if you were able to find that.
Yeah, I doubt you could have gone somewhere where you would not have found this. I mean, maybe somehow possible, but I feel like if you just walk for like 2 minutes, it's almost impossible unless you just go back and forth the entire time to not find a good sign there. And yeah, everyone, all 24 people, well, all people that still tried at that point, did apparently find one of those road signs, because I think the furthest away anyone was about 1 kilometer.
Nice. Round 5 was only a jump, skip, and a hop away from round 4, just under and off the 61. Another one of those sort of rural rounds that would give you a bit of a fright, but then once you get into a few of the neighboring roads, plenty of signs to help you find this one.
Yeah, and a location that could be frustrating in, if you go maybe a kilometer further north or two and you end up in a place where there aren't so many nice signs. But as we had it here, not the most difficult location. It also was one of the sort of roads off of the main road there that actually had something that was quite distinct. So even pinpointing was pretty easy on that one.
Yeah, so overall, a pretty easy seed for Taiwan, I would say. We didn't get anything in the mountains, and all of the locations had something close by that gave them a major road number, and sometimes even a city. So that was really nice for our drivers, and that is reflected in the scores in the sense that there are a lot of high scores, not too many perfect games as we take a look at those now, but plenty of 24 nines. So a lot of people kind of missing their pinpoint here or there in this one Calamity, but able to find the general area in all, actually our top 15 drivers all breaking that 24,000 mark.
Yeah, you could barely afford to lose 100 points if you still wanted to get, well, any points for the standings. Overall, though, probably the only real surprise in quotation marks, because he hasn't had the best of seasons so far, but, looking at last season as well, it's not that amazing, is that Carp managed to get his first podium. He'd only picked up 16 points so far in the first 4 weeks, so that's a nice boost, almost doubling his point total just with that. Other than that, not the most surprising. You've got Orpheus and Box at the top again. I snagged fourth place as well, which is quite nice. Then Jack there, Max, Xander. Xander, I guess, also for him, he hasn't had the best of seasons. Done decently in Chile last week, where he finished in the top 10 twice. But he's been mostly struggling to get further up than like the fifth, sixth, seventh positions. So he's not making the most amount of points from his good performances. And that's one of the main reasons why he's still not climbed up that far in the rankings.
Yeah, one thing to mention here, Clemens down there in 23rd after a pretty good first round, but a horrible second round. He pretty much just decided it was better to play for a spot in the sprint race in the coming week in Belgium. So he just pretty much zipped through the last couple rounds and didn't take them too seriously at all. That makes his score pretty low in that one. But yeah, Calamity, as you mentioned, round one had those roads that were slightly misnamed, which threw you off and caught a few people who probably would have gotten a perfect game if it wasn't for that round.
Let me actually check up on that, because I think it was only me. It was Barry lost a lot of points in round one, but
Jack lost it in the second round.
Yeah,
okay, I see.
Most people, it was Jack who lost all of his points in the second round. Xander also lost all of his points in the second round. And Barry lost all of his points in the first round, but he was like 4 kilometers away, so he wasn't, his wasn't road based, so to speak.
Okay, well, let's shift over then to the sprint race in Taipei City, which was really interesting in terms of its coverage. It includes the very dense city that we all know as a capital city, but also lots of countryside in its official city boundaries, which we did get one location out there. Our first location, though, was not too far from the river in the west part of the city, Calamity.
Yeah, I'm in that state again where this has been 1.5 weeks ago, so I don't remember what I found. There's a couple of things I could imagine I found. I think in this round specifically, I went south and ended up finding Minsheng West Road, which was what I recognized, and that made me, find the right place. You could have also gone west and found, well, not exactly the river, because there's a pretty big wall that stops you from seeing it, but you could have found the road right next to the river. And if you've done a bit of practicing maybe, or been in that location before, then you would have recognized that, okay, I don't see the river, but it's obvious it's behind this. And you also could have maybe found Taipei Bridge, which crosses the river just a bit northwest of here.
Yeah, not a bad spot. Round two did see us in that countryside location off of the two, kind of tucked away in a small little neighborhood. But again, I think a lot of the clues were just the fact that you weren't in a city, which meant go look outside of the city for this one. and that would have been pretty straightforward to find.
Yeah, it seemed pretty obvious to me that we'd have to be somewhere in the northern part of town, or of the pretty large area of the town. And from that, I was just looking. Well, I went east to start with, and then you pretty quickly get to a sort of major intersection, major for like up there in the mountains somewhere. And you had the road names there, and then I just went looking for the road names in that northern section, and they weren't too difficult to find. And then there was a house as well, right next to the start, that made pinpointing, well, relatively easy, although it was actually the case in not only in Taipei but in Taiwan generally, that quite a lot of the times the actual location is like a few meters off the road, which makes it difficult to get as exact as possible.
Round 3 saw us in the heart of the business district of Taipei, really close to Taipei World Trade Center and 101. So those big fancy landmarks just down the road from you made this one pretty straightforward to pinpoint if you at least familiarized yourself with a few spots in the city beforehand.
Yeah, this was the quickest round for me, not because of the convention center there or the World Trade Center or whatever. I just looked at road names and was like, hey, there's Xinyi Road, however you might want to pronounce that, section 5. And then you just go to the road, go to section 5, and hey, there it is.
Very nice. Yeah, it's nice how they're labeled in town, at least. Round 4 saw us head to the west side of town again in the Wanhao district, tucked away in a bit of a little neighborhood, but again, major roads around you should help you find your location.
Yeah, this one was actually the most difficult by far for me, because it's quite in the middle of a lot of smaller roads. So if you want to get to one of the bigger roads, you'd have to travel quite far. And I did find Wanda Road, which I remembered from practice. But what I didn't make the connection is that Wanhua, the district, and Wanda, the road, could have some sort of connection. So in the end, I think it was just remembering, okay, where did I have the rounds in practice? I think I had one down there. And in the end, I did find the right road. But yeah, I only made that connection between Wanda and Wanhua afterwards.
And then finally, round 5 saw us in the Nehu district in the northeast part of the city, across the river from the more densely populated area. But again, we were pretty close for another major road. The one and a couple of landmarks close by as well were pretty nice. The river crossing just to your west was probably the biggest clue to help you pinpoint this one.
It was actually, funnily enough, for me, because you see like this major road that goes through here, and then the road that helped me wasn't the major road. It was the one that's like a few meters to the north of that goes east, because that's Minkan East Road on section 6. So I knew where Minkan Road was. I wouldn't have known where, obviously I would have seen where the 1 was, but I don't think I ever saw a sign towards that. So it really was Minkan Road there that saved me from losing a lot of points, because the other roads around that area, which are all called like Ruiguang Road, I haven't recognized those, and I don't think I'd ever been in that district in one of my practice rounds. So thank God for that one road there that I did recognize.
Yeah, those section numbers going from west to east are really helpful when you can be like, oh, okay, well, if I'm on this road, then I just go along it until I find the right section number, and then start looking for my smaller roads in that area, and helps pin it out. Very nice. Well, yeah, this was a bit of a tricky one for our drivers, Calamity. A lot more feast or famine than the nation was. You did manage with your very nice game to just eke out Ordbaka for the podium position here. A few minutes, not even a minute, I think, separating you two.
I think it was like 2.5 to 3 minutes, somewhere in that sort of area. I had 9 minutes. Yeah, I had 9 minutes something. Ordbok had 12 minutes something. Yeah. So he really benefiting from the additional time that he had there. Although we don't really know. He could have just spent all of his additional time trying to get a meter or two closer and would have already been there anyway. But I was actually really surprised to see such low scores overall, because while it wasn't like the most easy seed. I could definitely see like people struggling a bit with that location in the north. But overall, I thought I didn't have much trouble with it. So I was surprised that essentially you could have gotten 0 points in one of the rounds and still finished seventh.
Yeah. Yeah,
Definitely
a lot of scores around that 20,000 mark or even under that were in that those point scoring positions here. Mr. Blue, Moist Flubber, Orpheus 18,000, 19,000. So yeah, not the best showing from everybody, but I mean, perhaps the trickiest part of playing a city like Taipei is just kind of knowing how the city might be laid out, trying to recognize a few of those district names that you might see. It is in the Latin alphabet, so it's not like it's going to completely be relying on Chinese. So it was a bit surprising when I was going through these and posting scores that there were so many lower end of this one. But I think a lot of people just would have liked an extra minute, maybe, and that would have seen the scores jump up by a couple thousand. But it is funny that to note that you and Orbuka are the two who are also playing this in another competition. So you've had extra practice and motivation, perhaps that boosted you over the top there.
I did play like 4 or 5 seeds of it before actually playing the sprint race. And Ortboka said that he'd been to Taipei before, so that obviously helps him as well there.
Yeah, but a very nice showing from Carp here. A double podium, third place in both the sprint and the feature race for them in this one. Well, this affects the standings a little bit. Boxa and Orpheus, no surprise, still in that first and second position with their strong performances this week. Calamity, the big change here, you jump up into third, overtaking Colin Ginther. Jack, your fellow countryman, but on Bamberg's team, is in fifth, running out that top 5. Really not the seasons to be thinking about a whole lot for Laban Greb. Calamity had some decent scores, just hasn't been able to get into the points, still on 0. And Wickham has got a single point at least, so that bumps him off the bottom of the pile for that. But some other strugglers we might throw in there. Shumi had one good week, same with Wakelock, but no real points outside of that. And the Baseman just barely being able to find himself in that top 10 most weeks. For that, not picking up too many points for him as well.
Yeah, it was a great week for me. I actually picked up the most points of everyone with 37 points. A fantastic week for Carp as well, who went from 16 points to 46 in 1 week and catapulted himself up these standings. Colin for the second week in a row with 0 points. So he's fallen off quite a lot. He's still in fourth because he had quite some very good performances in some of the previous weeks, but he's starting to struggle a lot with some of the countries he might be less familiar with. Also, a pretty bad week for Barry, who didn't pick up points. Clemens, no points in Taiwan either. And yeah, you mentioned it at the bottom. A lot of those people who've mostly had like one good race, even sometimes not even a whole good weekend, like Wakelock, who won a single race and other than that hasn't picked up points so far. And Hedig Muse, similar, I think, who's won one race and had 2 10th place finishes. Apart from that, it is still reasonably close, but we're sort of starting to see a few gaps forming here and there. Boxer obviously still quite far ahead, but behind that, you can't really, because a few weeks ago you could still say, hey, it's like second to like 15, no problem, like one win and you're there. And right now, if you like, from maybe the closest group is from 19th from Wakelock, maybe up to, well, 12th is really close still, and then you kind of start seeing small increases in the gaps. He could still, with another win, he could still get all the way up to 8th, but then it starts getting a bit more difficult. And it'll only get more difficult as the season goes on and people start picking up more points.
Yeah, there are a lot of points up for grabs every week in terms of there's 25 for that top spot, 18 for second, 15 for third. But we're seeing the same drivers in the top 10 almost every week. And a lot of the points coming in the lower half of the table here are, like you said, one standout performance where they show up once, get a win, a top 5 place maybe, and then they kind of get a few 9th or 10th places. So if you really want to start climbing that table, you need to be in the top 10 every week in at least one of the races, if not two, if you're trying to make up positions, which is definitely proving to be a bit harder for some of these drivers halfway through the season. But we are only halfway through the season, so they've got 5 more weeks to turn things around and start to challenge for some of those higher positions and give themselves a good chance to stay on with their teams next season. Shifting over to the Constructors Challenge, your amazing point gain sees FGT move into third. Very close race there between Scantrum, FGT, and Nordhagen, 17 to 13 points, only that 4-point gap. Oberhausen, of course, running away with things again, mostly on the shoulders of Horde of Boxa. After that, Calamity, it's a pretty tight race for the rest as well. Kasserwasser on 107, 90 for Chariot, and 71 for Bamberg.
Yeah, it's very close still from second to maybe down to Chariots. I think Bamberg is struggling a bit with Jack being pretty much the only one picking up any significant points. So they're in a bit worse of a position. Nordhagen have been really struggling though. I mentioned it in the driver standings that Colin hasn't picked up a point in 2 weeks, but Max also has only picked up 8 points in the past 2 weeks. So they've picked up the third least amount of points of any of the teams. Only Cape and Lancaster have picked up no points in the past 2 weeks with less. Orient is actually in a pretty interesting spot there because it's only Xander driving anymore for that team, but he has picked up points in all of the past 4 races. It's just not been very many. It's been 4, 1, 6, and 8 points. So he's unfortunately still down there in 11th place with his own team at this point. And yeah, between all of those, I think like the teams of Octane and Opava are in a sort of unique place where they're not really fighting for much. It seems unlikely that they'll drop down behind Cape or into Lancaster, but at the same time, they've really not shown much to suggest that they could, go up there and maybe fight for a top half spot. So they're in a bit of a weird place. And yeah, as you said, Oberhausen are running away with it. Even if Barry hasn't picked up any points this week, Boxer can make up for that, and the other way around as well. In some of the weeks where Boxer might not pick up too many points, Barry can add onto that. And I'd be very surprised if the title doesn't go to Oberhausen.
Again, yeah, that signing in the offseason, very nice for them. And Nordhagen looked like at the beginning of the season to still not going to be slipping too much after losing Boxa. But as the season progresses, maybe their dreams will be slipping through their fingers as well. Well, before we take a look at the map for the next week, let's take a quick look at how Formula G2, some reserve drivers hoping to make a bit of a splash and maybe grab a seat come next season in Formula G1 that is. In Taiwan, Renata proves her strength again as she continues to do very well, taking top spot. Ankau, Amkemp, and Ben Savage rounding out the top 4. Only 4 drivers really playing in that competition. DHZ, DNSing. There we go. Hasn't played for a couple weeks, even though he has picked up a few points in this season. And so that means Renata has a pretty good lead on 101 points. I think that's the exact same number of points that, Box has 158. So not quite, but 108 points, not a bad showing at all. 85 for Anka and Ben sitting at 7. But again, with 2 or 3 seats up for grabs, it's still pretty much anybody's game after 5 weeks in Formula G2. Well, the map for next week is a European one, and Calamity, I'm expecting to see a lot of very high scores and nice pinpointing. We are in Belgium, which can be a bit of a mess given how densely populated it is, or little villages scattered everywhere, but it is back to familiar territory for our drivers, so perhaps an increase in the score to go along with that.
Belgium.
One of your favorites, right?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about Belgium. Now I think we've said enough about Belgium in like 17 different instances. I don't know why I feel, but I feel like I've talked about Belgium like 20 times already. it's not the biggest country. It's split into two halves, a Dutch and a French part. And, well, apart from that, pretty decently signed, but there's also a lot of rural areas that don't have great signage. And that's about it.
Yeah. Then Antwerp as a sprint race city.
Yeah, Antwerp is a bit more interesting. It is kind of similar to Taipei in the sense that it does extend quite a lot further north than you might have imagined, because it includes the whole port area that's to the north of the city. Apart from that, the city itself is relatively densely populated in terms of roads, even quite far out still. So it can be pretty difficult to find like a random road that you've seen in on one of the signs. There is the river, as apparently is a theme through all of our sprint races this season. That goes through the west of the city. I think it's also pretty much the border of it on the western side. I don't think there's much of Antwerp that's west of the river.
Yeah, I don't think it jumps over much.
Yeah. So that might be able to help you out. But at the same time, there's so much of the river, especially in the more northern parts, that you might first have to check which side of the river, where is this exactly? And yeah, the industrial area, sort of the industrial port areas can be very confusing as well, because there's pretty much no signs there. So you kind of have to help yourself with maybe like PYs and maybe figuring out, okay, the river is this way and it goes that way and maybe it's here.
Yeah, so back to more familiar territory, at least compared to Taiwan, but a country that is challenging in its own right, despite being a more familiar European city, very dense, lots of roads, and kind of confusing layouts can give their own challenge to our drivers. So we'll see how they do in Belgium, and we will see you all next week. Take care.
Bye.